All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Making the Cut, and welcome to Sourcing. Everybody thinks this is the most important thing that they need to know if they want to start a business that involves making products. And believe me when I tell you, after this, you will know how to get anything made anywhere and for the right price. However, it is not the most important thing you need to know. The most important thing anybody needs to do that is starting a business is sell. You have to want to sell. You have to be good at selling, and you have to, which anybody, if you believe in your product, you're great at selling, but you got to sell, sell, sell. Otherwise, the rest is a waste of time. Now you're going to get into spending money because you're going to be hiring pattern makers, factories, vendors. Basically, you're going to be buying fabrics, materials. This is the time you want to incorporate. And you also want to set up your books, which is not as complicated as it sounds, especially at this stage. But basically, keep a file with all your receipts with each vendor. I really recommend getting a bookkeeper because it's not my forte to be organized that way. And excellent bookkeepers cost anywhere roughly from $25 an hour to $35 an hour. They're very well worth it. You can incorporate your business online. It shouldn't cost you more than $250 to $450, depending on the province or the state you're in. You can do it all online. The key reason for incorporating is liability. So what does that mean? Let's say you hire the wrong vendor and they screw everything up. They will go after XYZ Incorporated, whatever your company is. If you're not incorporated, they'll go after you personally. So if they send you personally to collections, this will affect your credit. If you are personally in collections, when you go get a mortgage, when you go for any kind of a loan, it will show up, a car lease. So you want to separate yourself and your company at this point because you are now going to be spending money towards your company. The invoice any contractor is writing the invoice out to should be to your business. All right, everyone, let's get into sourcing. So everyone thinks this is really difficult. First things first, when you're creating a product, anything, you need to really know the fabric. So apparel, you need to know, is it knits? Is it fleece? Is it crepe? Is it a woven or knit? Is it leather? Is it faux leather? You've got to know your fabric. You've got to know what you're making your product in for design reasons and also for make reasons. Again, jewelry, gold, silver, what metals are you using? What stones, what gems? For shoes, canvas, leather, faux leather. What are you making your product in? And for all of furniture, same thing. So where do you find fabric? Where do you find fabric? Wholesale. We all know you go to retail stores to find fabric at retail. Trade shows. So the best trade show, there is no such thing. Although Premier Vision, which happens in New York and also in Paris, is phenomenal for fabric. For jewelry, there is an amazing trade show in Las Vegas, JCK. For outerwear, there is Outdoor Retailer. For everything, there's the Magic Trade Show in Vegas, which happens twice a year. We will have a link to trade show links that give you the trade shows around the world. But the key trade shows for fabric really happen in North America and in Paris with Premier Vision. So North America being, New York and LA as well. LA, there's the LA Textile Show. But once you zero in, and then there's also there's leather traders at these different trade shows. This is why it's very important to know when you're building your line what it's made out of. We will have a link for you to take a look at all the different trade shows, and it's literally research. So it takes time, but you've got to research these shows. You've got to see who's going to be exhibiting there. When you go to certain trade shows, like the Magic Trade Show, which is not magic, it stands for men's apparel, and it's not just men's apparel. Everything is there. I mean, shoes, clothing, sourcing from overseas, like factories and all that stuff. Fabrics is there, young designers, emerging designer section, a denim section, a street section, a ready-to-wear section. It's a huge show. It's overwhelming. It's not very targeted. I don't think it's the best first show for anybody who wants to launch a brand to go to, just because it's so huge. For example, if you're doing outerwear, I highly recommend the outdoor retailer show that happens twice a year. Used to be in Salt Lake City. I think they've moved it. You just look at outdoor retailer, it'll come up. I think it's Colorado now, but it's fantastic. And for bathing suits, for example, for intimate wear, Magic actually has an intimate section too, but there is a Miami Swim where there's intimates there and bathing suits. And then there's going to be suppliers for bathing suit fabrics, for example. And then there is there's just an accessory show. And then there's a emerging designer show. So depending upon what you're doing and what you're looking for will determine which shows you go to. But for the fabric shows, there was a trade show by a woman. She used to be based out of New York. DG Expo, it used to be called, but it's now changed. It's a traveling textiles and trim show. And it's specialty for small volume, which is when you're starting out, it's what you need. DG Expo Fabric and Trim. Here we go. Yeah. So it still happens. Chicago, LA, San Francisco. It's an excellent show. Premier Vision happens in New York. There's also the textile show that happens in New York. These are large shows. My recommendation is to go to the US shows. If you're watching this from Europe, all these shows happen in Europe as well. And you're super fortunate, because you've got a lot of sustainability angle shows and it's a niche market in Europe. So that's how you find fabric. If you're in North America, there's something called jobbers. What are jobbers? Jobbers are wholesalers or distributors that have found materials either from a factory or from a designer where they're clearing them out, like 10 cents on the dollar, or from a fabric mill, clearing it out. So this is called a jobber, and they will have 500 meters of something, or, 100 pounds of something if it's metals, or X amount of skins of leather. So these jobbers or middlemen are also a great place to find materials, fabrics, etc. The thing with jobbers is they may or may not have that same material when you come again. Although, if you have access to go to New York is phenomenal for the fashion, because the garment district there, though much smaller, still is bar none, nothing compares to it. So between 35th and 40th Street, between the avenues of 6th and 9th, is all jobbers and factories and fabric representatives. So these reps are representative of mills. When you go direct to a mill, the big difference is they have what's called minimum quantity order. So if I want to order navy blue fleece for sweatshirts or a forest green that I have to order a minimum of, 400 meters, let's say. And each mill, depending upon who I like, has a different minimum. So, and that's per color. That's not of the fabric. So this is where jobbers are going to a place that sells or that specializes for smaller volume is key when you're starting out, because you don't want to tie up all your money in inventory. You really, really don't. If I buy 400 meters of it, I'm going to get it for 20% less a meter. Yes, you are, but you need to make sure you either have sold all of the product to be able to use the 400 meters or can sell it. Because once you get stuck with fabric, you're kind of stuck with it. There's no returning it, or any materials for that matter. So you really want to make sure you have a pathway to clear it out. If you can get to New York for a sourcing trip, it is very valuable. Very, very valuable. Vancouver, Canada has gotten way better. So it used to be, when I went to fashion school in Toronto, the hub was Toronto. It's really moved here. There's a lot of wholesalers or distributors that carry yardage. Montreal is also really great. All of the wholesalers and suppliers that are in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, though, will be exhibiting at any of these shows. So if you're Canadian and you do want that, you will find them even at these US shows. You're sort of better off going to the US shows if you're from North America, because you'll have access to the Canadian suppliers, the US suppliers, and the European and the Asian suppliers, and the South American. It's a way better way to go. Magic, which happens in Vegas twice a year, is an experience. I do recommend it just so that you can see how huge the industry is. It's mind-boggling. Be prepared to be overwhelmed, and that's fine. So brands also, if you're doing swim or intimates, go to the swim and intimates show, because people that are looking for streetwear aren't going to be looking for intimates. So you're not going to get more customers by broadening your scope of who you reach at a trade show. Trade shows are very focused. So when buyers from stores go to these shows, the intimates buyer goes to the intimates section. The streetwear buyer goes to the streetwear section. They're not walking the entire show so that they can, do divisions. It's also, I feel, really good to go to these shows so that you see as a brand which show you want to go to, because participating at these shows is very expensive. However, walking these shows is your plane ticket, hotel for a night or two, and entry to the show. If you say you're a brand or a manufacturer, you're going to pay more. If you say you're a retailer, you're going to pay less. So what you do need is proof that you are a business. So that's like a business card, a website, or vendor invoices. The bar is not terribly high. However, be prepared. So check out the websites of the trade shows you want to go visit and see which category you're going to attend at as and what you need to get that badge. Okay. And pretty much you can fill all that stuff out online and they'll give you your access there. And then you just go and they give you your badge when you're there. Okay. So that's fabrics. Let's go to Smith jackets. If you're making blazers and you're going to make tweeds and Ponte and this, that, you've got this idea in mind, but then you go to a jobber or you go to a fabric show and you start seeing this amazing herringbones and you start seeing this worsted wool and you start accumulating a lot of different, wouldn't this jacket be great in this fabric and this fabric? And then before you know it, your sample line is going to cost you more. This is why swatching and creating your line sheet of what your line is, how many colors you're going to do, how many prints you're going to do is essential. It can blow up really fast to bankrupt you, really, before you even get out of the gate. But you need to know what your parameter is when you're looking for all your fabrics. And it can change. This is why these boards, when you're doing your line sheet, is super important, because you're putting up all these things, all your ideas, all your fabrics to see and create this cohesive brand. So that's fabrics. How do I find my pattern maker or my craftsman or my shoemaker or my factory pattern maker for clothing? There was no ChatGPT. How I used to teach sourcing, and the philosophy and the theory of it still works for anything you want to do, is let's say you're in Dallas or somewhere close to Dallas, and you are wanting to start a clothing brand and you don't even know where to start to find a pattern maker or a factory. If you can go to a sewing store, not a fabric store, but a store that sells either faff machines or singers or whatever, like a sewing store, and ask them where you can find an industrial sewing machine, or do they know a mechanic for sewing machines? When you find a mechanic or you find industrial sewing machine suppliers, they will tell you, if you ask them, can you tell me about a factory nearby that makes cotton pants, that makes linen dresses, that makes baby onesies? They will know if you go to the source. So I use Dallas. It's a lot easier for me to use New York or LA. I mean, those are kind of the hubs. New York. So if you went to the garment district, there are actually like mechanic shops, small little shops that sell industrial sewing machines. And if you go in there and ask them about a factory, they will tell you. If you go to a factory and ask them for if they can recommend a pattern maker, you will find a pattern makers. If you were to go into a cookware shop, we have an industrial kitchen shop. If I were to go in there and ask them, can you recommend to me the most authentic Italian restaurant in Vancouver? They would know it. They supply the restaurants as well as equipment. They have it for individuals as well. So if you go to a place that will supply factories or pattern makers, you will find what you're looking for. Another way for pattern makers and factories, which I think is in fact better, is there's something called grading, which is when you get your samples made, you are making them in sample size. And so whether it be a size 6, size 8, whatever your sample size is. But then you have to take it somewhere to a pattern maker or grader to grade it to all the other sizes. So in New York, the business is so busy that they have just companies that just do marking and grading for factories there. So they know who the best pattern makers are, which designers use them. And if you know a well-known designer that's a comparable to your brand, that pattern maker will suit you. And they also know who the factories are that do smaller volume, that do knits or wovens that might suit you. So these are called graders. Everywhere else, like in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, most places now also, even in New York, they do pattern making and they do grading and they do sample making. This has been happening more in the East Coast over the last 10 years. Vancouver is smaller, so the studios kind of have always, over the last 20 years, done all of that. Grading happens electronically. It's digital pattern making. Not everybody has the software because it's expensive. Just because somebody has it doesn't make them great, though. So how do you find them now? The internet is what it is, so you go online. So there's a lot of places that do what's called white labeling. So that means that they're kind of more of a broker. It takes a lot of research. And then what you do after you research is you pick up the phone and you call. This is where it gets frustrating because a lot of times they don't call you back. So if you don't know what you're making, meaning what fabrics you're using, what your quantity is, how to describe what it is you're wanting, they're going to get frustrated with you and hang up really quickly. Manufacturing and pattern making, it's a speed game, and there's not a lot of room for errors, and nobody gets paid in the brainstorming they're going to do with you to work out what you don't know yet. So pattern maker is going to say, do you have sketches? Do you have spec sheets? Do you have any of those things? If you don't, they're going to charge you to help you make it, as they should. Do you know what your fabric is? If you don't, do not go into the pattern making stage. Don't use them. If I'm using this fabric for my blouse, this is going to hang differently than if I'm using a chiffon. You need to know these things as a pattern maker, as any engineer for any type of product you're making. Be very clear, have your spec sheets. How do you price something? To get a pattern from idea or on paper to a finished pattern that fits, so that would be, you're looking at anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the style. This is where wanting to make too many of something could, really blow your budget. But you start there. You do not go into manufacturing without making sure your patterns are perfect. Because if something doesn't fit, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is, your customer's not coming back to buy from you. Fit is everything. So you've got your sketches, then you've got your specs, you've got your fabric samples swatched to the spec, and you're off looking for a pattern maker. Questions to ask. Who else do you make for? Do you work with woven? Do you work with knits? Can you tell me how much a pattern would be from spec sheet to completion for, if you're doing ready to wear, ask for a lined blazer. Dress pants. But you need to know the fabric. No one makes the perfect pattern out of the gate. There's got to be a fitting. There's going to be adjustments. There's going to be another sample. And you get charged for that. And that's normal. Another very important thing is to have a fit model. So your fit model has everything to do with your brand. So I'm going to go back to Diane von Furstenberg. Her fit model, or her customer, was a woman. It was a curvaceous woman. So her size 6 had boobs and had hips. That was her muse. That long, lanky, thin, straight, minimalist silhouette. A very Gwyneth Paltrow. So your fit model needs to fit that, your brand, who you're making for. Goes back to knowing who your customer is. When you go in to make your pattern and you have your first fitting, they're going to ask for the size. So ideally you have your fit model because you've got to give them their measurements. Chest, waist, hips. That fit model should be the model that's at every fitting, if you can afford it. Fit models are anywhere from, depending upon where you are, $50 to $150 an hour. Fit model has nothing to do with looks. A fit model gets paid to stay the same size, and it's their proportion. So again, going retail shopping in a store that you want to see your brand in, go try all the other labels that are there and see how they fit. They fit as per the proportions to their muse, to their fit model. So some brands, in jeans, the waist might be a little higher than other jeans. It's not the style, but where the waist hits might be an inch higher. Some dresses might have more curvaceous to them. That's more about their muse and their fit model. So these things are all research and very important. So that's pattern making, product development, and getting you to make your products in a nutshell. How do you choose your factory, and how do you know how much you're going to pay for something? Usually the pattern makers know factories, but if you're doing small volume, like 24 units to 100 units, a lot of these factory pattern making places are doing that. But if you're doing more units or you want to work with a factory, the process is similar in the sense of if you were doing it in larger cities like New York and LA, Philadelphia even, and Vancouver, and Montreal, for factories they would recommend. Now, if you don't want to use that pattern maker, say, I'm really looking for a factory because we're going to start with 500 to 1,000 units per style. You want them to understand that you want a proper factory. Your pattern maker might also send you to a factory that would. The other places that know factories are the fabric suppliers you're using when you're doing smaller volume. Let's say you're doing a sweatshirt line. The fabric suppliers that you're going to use throughout Canada, they send their fabrics to all the different factories and pattern makers. You have to have a relationship. You have to start with a relationship with them first, though. So don't just randomly at a fabric show, go to a fabric supplier saying, hey, can you tell me about this factory near you? No. When you buy from them, whatever fabric, and you say, I'm looking for a pattern maker or a factory to get going. Can you recommend a few? They will definitely know a few to recommend you. When you go to a factory, if you go to a large factory that does high volume product and you only want to make a couple of hundred of something, they're not going to give you the time of day. They may or may not send you to the right place because they're busy and it's high volume and speed. When you are looking for your production price, you ask for 500 plus units of the style you're showing them. You're not going to be making 500 units of style at the get-go, but that's the price you want to get so that you start costing your product. Now, you will be paying a surcharge for lower volume. I highly recommend you pay the surcharge and you do not drown yourself in inventory. It is not as easy to sell as you think. Make a lesser margin to start out and sell out, and then go back and make more. That is the winning formula, because when you have boxes of inventory that you can't move, you are now not just creating a line because you've got to do next season and do next styles. You're managing logistics. You are still a one-man show when you're starting out. And that is your money tied up in there. So get pricing for 500 plus units. The factory is also going to ask you how many colors in those 500. So I wouldn't do more than 2 colors so you really get a production price. Hitting those numbers is your job, and we're going to go through that in the next episode. But what you're trying to get here is the right pricing, the correct pricing. And you can go to a couple of factories and see who you get on with. It's a business relationship. Take a look at samples, their production samples that they have. All factories have product they've made, production samples of past production. And normally there's production happening on the floor and you will see the labels that they work for. So that's sourcing. That's finding contractors and that's manufacturing. This theory works the same for shoes. This theory works the same for jewelry. This theory works the same for accessories like bags, you name it, lifestyle. It's the same thing. Go to the source. So, for example, if you're doing a bedding line, you're going to be getting linens and bedding from mills. There's key factories that just do that. It is the biggest thing I want to do is really demystify it, though, in that you can't just sit behind your computer and Google your way to the factory that all the top brands use. The factories that all the top brands use aren't going to be manufacturing for you because they're doing millions of units for them. You have to get up from behind your computer and go visit these factories that you find. It takes time, and you're going to like a few. That part's not changed, no matter how far the internet and AI has come. You have to go in, you have to see the product. The pattern maker and or the factory is going to ask you key questions on your specs that you need to be able to answer. So the less questions your pattern maker and your factory that you're using have in regards to what you want to get made, the less it's going to cost you. I used to have a studio where we made patterns and we also manufactured. So we would have people that came in with spec sheets, but I would ask them, because it was just like a shirt, but there were no seam lines. So I didn't know, is this a set-in sleeve? Is there a placket on the front? Is there a placket on the sleeves? Is there a cuff? They hadn't drawn all these lines. And these are key things that doesn't show on your spec sheet. The pattern maker is going to figure it out for you. If the pattern maker figures it out wrong, you're going to pay for the pattern maker to fix it because you didn't have it down. So the more you can think through on these things, the better it is for you. However, I'm sure a few of you are thinking, well, how do I know what a set-in sleeve is or a cuff or this or that, the other? Let's say you're going to make a shirt line like Rochelle. Take out 2 or 3 blouses, shirts from your closet and draw the stick figure. There's croquis online. There's croquis online that you can print off and just draw the shirt on this croquis. There's also on YouTube, Zoe Hong. She's amazing. And she has free YouTube sketching classes. Phenomenal. So you can sketch it out. Make sure the challenge here is to draw every seam. Wherever there's a seam, draw that line so that you start seeing what you're supposed to be seeing and putting down. Same thing goes if it's shoes. Same thing goes if it's linens. Same thing goes if it's homeware. Same thing goes if it's jewelry. All right. So I hope this helped. Again, if you subscribe and you follow us, you'll get these PDFs on sourcing. All right. Create your spec sheet for each individual style in your line by tracing, photocopying, or redrawing the images you created in the weeks before. Attach your swatches to it. The more info you have to give to the wholesaler, to the pattern maker, to the craftsman, to whomever, the less it'll cost you and you're on your way. Lay your line out on a foam board or on PowerPoint. I personally prefer it by hand on a foam board because that tactile thing really helps you. But you want to see the entire line with all the swatches, start making the edits. All right, guys, have fun. Thanks for joining.